Bespoke radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
I need your help to get to the year 1985.
You're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Yeah. How you doing? All right, let's go. Fade to Black. Bespoke radio for the masses. How you doing? Today's Wednesday, October 5th. 279 days into the new year. Just 87 days left. Yeah, I know I said 92 yesterday. I don't know what's up. Math was off. Days were right. 87 days left. We're live from a bunker somewhere in downtown Burbank, California, and I would like to welcome everybody listening all around the world, all across the United States, hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south, far and near. This is Fade to Black for KJCR, the Game Changer Network, and KGRA, the planet. I'm your so humble host, Jimmy Church. All right, everybody, what is cracking? We got a biggie tonight. Very, very special guest back with us, Daniel P. Sheehan. That's all I need to say right there. Just Daniel P. Sheehan. That's it. There you go. He's here. We're going to discuss government secrecy, UFOs, and disclosure, and lots of other things. He is one of the absolute best. He is the people's advocate, one of the great attorneys in this country's history, and he is here with us tonight. And the thing is about Danny is you have to stop and listen to every word. There are very, very, very few, a select few people that walk around on this planet with his street cred, the things that he has done, not only with school and Washington, but he has managed to, and I mess with him a lot, and I should definitely show him the respect that he deserves, because he's just a really, really great guy, and you get to know him, and you find out very quickly that he's very down to earth, and his feet are on the ground, and that's the thing, you know. And so you kind of lose sight sometimes when you're around greatness like that, you know, sometimes you need to show respect. And I play around, and I've done that with him in the past, because the thing is, and I remember we were doing a conference together, and I was hosting a panel, and he kept referencing things that he has done through this conversation, and I would go, when did that happen? Well, I was 24. Oh, really? And then I went on to do, and then I did that. And how old were you when you did that? 26. And, you know, he did more by the age of 30 than 99% of us would dream to achieve in an entire lifetime. And that is Danny Sheehan. And whether it's luck, it's synchronicity, it's being at the right place at the right time, certainly his intelligence and his attitude towards certain things attracted him to certain people to do the things that he has done. So there's always that. I mean, he's just a great attorney. But it's everything else. And it's been a remarkable career for him. And tonight, sit down, get comfortable, and listen to what Daniel Sheehan has to say. He is one of the best, and really looking forward to it. And, I do want to get into government secrecy. I'm going to be discussing that in just a bit, and UFOs and disclosure. That's such a big part of his life. But with Danny, I just sit and let him go. That's my job, is not to interrupt Danny Sheehan. So just get comfortable. It's going to be great. Tomorrow night, John Rappaport is going to be here. It's Thursday night, and it'll be another No More Fake Newsroom. It's going to be Thursday, and we've got Matthew, this hurricane that is barreling down on the southeast United States, and John is out there somewhere. So let's hope that everything's okay, first off. But second, he's way east, but he's a little north, but he's still south. So he may not see things until Saturday or Friday. But tomorrow's Thursday. We're going to have John here live from the East Coast. And we checked in with him today, and he checked in with us. And so far, so good. But everybody out on the East Coast that can hear my voice, be safe. Don't think that you can ride this kind of stuff out. Just never do that. Pack the car and head west. Go west, young man. Just go west. Go west. Find a Motel 6 and be safe. All right. And then go back home in a day or two, and everything will be fine. It's not going to be that big of a deal. But in the meantime, be safe out there. Head west. All right. Follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio. That's what you want to do. At JChurchRadio. Hashtag F2B is the sandbox. We don't bite. Come and hang out with us tonight. Yeah. Let's go. Got a lot to talk about. And let me, I kind of want to jump ahead. Just let me do this really quick, because I've got a lot to say tonight before I bring Danny on. And that is, first off, Life Change Tea. Life Change Tea has got the new chocolate colostrum in. So go to getthetea.com and get yourself some. I haven't gotten mine yet. It is en route. I expect it tomorrow. I can't wait. And I will give a full report tomorrow night on Fader Night. So excited, man. Chocolate colostrum. I'm addicted. Go to getthetea.com. Everybody here, the team, the family, everybody is on the Life Change Tea program. Help yourself right now. Go and change your life with the Life Change Tea. Use the promo code Jimmy over the phone or online and get yourself free shipping. All right. And then we have, of course, the Studio Dome Fader Night special. And there, just go click on the banner. It is there. True wireless stereo system, Bluetooth, 2 speakers, $129 in a hard shell case, includes free shipping. Promo code JCRTWS. With that, let's get this show cracking. Happy birthday to today. Brian Johnson is 69. Is he still the singer of AC/DC, by the way? Has he bowed out completely? Somebody in Australia right now, tweet to me if you've got any news on that. Is Brian Johnson still the singer of AC/DC? 69 years old. Bob Geldof, today is 65. Boomtown Rats, Up All Night. There's kids out there that have never heard that song. Isn't that crazy? Man, dominated MTV for about 2 years. Bob Geldof, 65 years old. You see that speech he did last week? Incredible. Steve Miller, today, 73 years old. Fly Like an Eagle, one of the great albums of all time. That's all I got to say there. Happy birthday, Steve, 73 years old. Our dead guy's birthday today is Bernie Mac, 1957 to 2008, died at the age of 50. The Bernie Mac show to me was one of the funniest ever, and his movies included, and did he have a movie career. Ocean's 11, 12, 13, Mr. 3000, Booty Call Friday, Players Club, Head of State, Charlie's Angels, Bad Santa, Guess Who, Pride, Soul Men, Transformers, Old Dogs, Madagascar. Well, it was actually Escape from Africa. You remember. Madagascar. Happy birthday, Bernie. You're one of the funniest dudes ever. Seriously. And there you go. On this day in history, with a special nod to our guest tonight, on this day in history, 1986, the Iran-Contra scandal unravels today when Eugene Hassenfuss is captured by troops of the Sandinista regime in Nicaragua after the plane in which he was flying is shot down, and he turns around and tells his captors it was for the CIA. The next day, October 6th, Daniel Sheehan gets the phone call. How crazy is that? We'll talk about that for a minute tonight. If I let Danny talk about Iran-Contra, that'll take over the whole show, and I'm just going to sit here and listen and take notes. But how was that? That's who we have on the show today. Fader fact, at the beginning of World War II, the United States Army was smaller than the Army of Portugal. That's right. The 174,000-man U.S. Army ranked 19th in size in the world, behind Portugal and only slightly ahead of Bulgaria. That is a fader fact. All right. Tonight, Danny Sheehan is here. Tomorrow night is another fader night with John Rappaport and his No More Fake Newsroom. And I don't know if you heard the news, but the FBI recently arrested a National Security Agency contractor and is investigating whether he stole and disclosed highly classified computer code that was developed to hack into the networks of foreign governments. And I spoke about this and reported on this back in August. And you remember that. The theft raises the embarrassing prospect that for the second time in 3 years, an insider has managed to steal highly damaging secret information from the NSA. The first of the two was, of course, Edward J. Snowden, who was also a contractor for the agency. He took a vast trove of documents, and I was speaking to an insider about this directly, and out of everything that Snowden stole, only 25% of it has been itemized and identified. 25%. 25%. There is a pile, gigabytes of info out there that hasn't even been looked at yet. Think about that. Now, the second perp, the second guy, the first guy, Edward Snowden, the second guy was identified as one Harold T. Martin III of Glen Burnie, Maryland. He was charged with theft of government property and unauthorized removal or retention of classified documents. During the FBI raid of his house, agents seized documents and stored digital information. A large percentage of the materials found in his house and car contained highly classified and top secret information. And this is where the story gets nuts. Stay with me. Nobody's going to talk about this, by the way, but I will. I don't care. I don't. Who did Martin work for? Well, let me tell you. The same firm as Snowden, Booz Allen Hamilton, which is responsible for the building and operating of many of the agency's most sensitive cyber operations. Now listen to everything that I have to say right now. Mr. Martin is suspected of taking the highly classified computer code developed by the agency to break into computer systems of adversaries like Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. Is this getting interesting? I'm just getting started. At the moment, the NSA are playing dumb, and they have to. The hacking that has been going on in Washington, D.C. right now apparently has been accomplished with their own software tools. They said back in August that one or two of their employees had left the stuff on local and or remote computers and were compromised. And that worked its way to Russia. Right? Okay. Well, that's their story, and they are sticking to it. But here's the deal. Someone in the CIA is following a policy of trying to embarrass and take down the NSA. And I'm not sure of the reason just yet. I have a few ideas, but something is going on, and the CIA is going to the greatest of lengths to pull this off. They want to bring down the house. They want to crack the NSA. They want to embarrass the NSA. And if you think that having the NSA software left out in the open by Booz Allen Hamilton contractors, and then somehow end up in the hands of Russian hackers who use it to disrupt the 2016 elections is crazy, and it is, and you might be taking crazy pills, but the CIA, did the exact same thing with Snowden. Wait, what? Yeah, I said it, and I'm not scared. Now listen to me. Here we have Snowden. Seriously, hear me out before you freak out. Just don't freak out yet. I understand where Snowden is held on the pedestal and in such high regard. I get that. But you can freak out in a minute. There's going to be time for that. Snowden, who didn't graduate from high school, got a GED. In 2004, he goes into the Army Reserve and applies for Special Forces, breaks his legs, and then gets hired. He applied for the Special Forces, by the way. Applied. There's a difference there. Breaks his legs, and then gets hired by the CIA at a job fair in 2006. His work experience was as a security guard at the University of Maryland for less than a year. And that was in 2005. So just to be clear here, we got a guy who got a GED, dropped out of high school for 9 months, didn't go back, got a GED, and then in 2004, he goes into the Army, breaks his legs. 2 years later, less than, he gets hired by the CIA at a job fair. I don't know how you get to sweet talk your way into the CIA at a job fair with the GED. I don't know how that happens, but apparently he did. And it would make for an excellent movie, too, by the way. Oh, wait, Oliver Stone beat me to that. Anyway, the last time I checked, the CIA requires a college degree. But maybe they make exceptions to those with a GED. I don't know. The good enough diploma is good enough for the CIA. Apparently. Why? Well, it appears that the CIA got their man. Think about it. In May 2006, Snowden wrote in Ars Technica that he had no trouble getting work because he was, and I'm quoting here, a computer wizard. After distinguishing himself as a junior employee on the top computer team, Snowden was sent to the CIA's secret school for technology specialists, a guy with a GED, where he lived in a hotel for 6 months while studying and training full time. Something smell fishy here? Let me continue. Yes, the company is grooming him for something. But he doesn't know it. And he actually thinks he is who he is. And why not? Or does he? We don't know. I can't imagine stepping up to a job fair, right? And you're talking to some spooks. CIA booth. Hey, man, how do you guys hire people? How can I apply? Well, where'd you go to school? I didn't. Oh, well, after I dropped out of high school, I got a GED. Do you guys have an application I can fill out? Actually, brah, you're hired. What? Is he an actual computer security expert flying around the world, fixing things, consulting, working for Dell, Geneva, Tokyo, Hawaii? Man, life is good for the GED, dude. So he decides to upgrade, and he goes and he studies at an online college. Well, you know, you got to get that pay-to-play master's degree, right? That would be a good cover for a, wait for it, a spy. And what a cover story it is. He'll quit the CIA on moral grounds, right? He's upset with the CIA in Geneva and the way they handled a banker. And, well, you know, why not? We'll get you to go and contract for the NSA. Who wouldn't? It's been a pretty easy life so far. Life is good for GED Snowden. Think about it. So he goes to the CIA and he's disgruntled, he's upset, and he makes the CIA the bad guys. That's the cover story. And the NSA are the good guys. He loved the NSA when he got there. He posted about it. He did. You can go and read it. Ars Technica, it's all there. And that's the story we'll run with. And apparently, the NSA doesn't vet their contractors anyway. And why should they? They don't deal with real secret stuff, I guess. I don't know. They appear really stupid right now, today, but that's another story. I'll get back to that. So, what does Snowden believe today in his reality? What does he believe? What does he tell his friends now? Not then, not 2 years ago, not 3 years ago, but today. What is it? What does he tell his friends? What does he really believe his history is? Who he is? Is it that he was an intelligence and security god? Because he has certainly stated that. His Wikipedia page is pretty clear. He was the smartest computer analyst, intelligence, security, networking man on the planet. The NSA says he was a low-level nobody. Does he believe that he was really a spook for the CIA, planted down inside the NSA to embarrass them? Because he has stated that too. Did he work for the CIA? Was he a spy? How was that possible? Where did the training happen? I don't know. But he's said that as well. So I'm not sure what he believes. Or how about that he was a patsy, a tool, a pawn in this complex game of chess? I'll lay that one out there. But I suppose we'll never know. One thing is for sure, his story just doesn't add up. But he believes it, and others do too. I'm not sure how somebody drops out of high school, gets a GED, and 2 years later, 3 years later, winds up at a job fair for the CIA. and 10 years later ends up bringing down the NSA. I'm not sure how that happens unless there was a plan. Could life in the dark, crazy world of cloaks and daggers really be this nuts? Yes, it can. Because today, we have Harold T. Martin III of Booz Allen Hamilton, contractor for the NSA, bringing down the house for a second time. You need to think about that. And you know what? So is Oliver Stone, because it's going to be his next movie. You are also very, very welcome. Think about that. And it could be, my friends, that Edward Snowden is who he says he is. And it could also be that Edward Snowden believes he is the person that he was made to be. And it could also be that Edward Snowden was working for the CIA. And the NSA and the CIA are peeing all over each other. And right now, the CIA has been pretty successful in embarrassing the NSA. And it could be just that. Tonight, Daniel P. Sheehan, right here on Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Email is jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. It's Fade to Black on the Game Changer Network and KGRA, The Planet. Go ahead, send me your Snowden hate mail. Jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. I read it all. I'll be right back.
You're listening to Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Fade to Black will now pause for alien identification.
The station that talks the net. KGRA Radio. What's up, revolutionaries? It's me, Jimmy Church. Do you have an IRS or state tax issue? Well, I did, and I called national tax experts. My problems were fixed, done, fini, and man, I gotta tell you, it was a relief. National Tax Experts are a recognized tax office that services clients in all 50 states. It doesn't matter where you live. Give them a call. I'm telling you, they take the time to understand each and every client's individual financial status as well as their financial goals. And that's exactly what you need, my brother, when you're taking on the evil three-letter. So, seriously, give them a call today at 1-877-909-5444. Again, 1-877-909-5444. Or go check out their website, www.nattaxexperts.com. That's NATTAXEXPERTS.com. Tell them Jimmy sent you.
Hi, folks. In a world of GMO, genetically modified organisms, that is, chemicals, processed foods, and a healthcare system that's unraveling like a cheap suit, it's time to prepare. God created herbs, and herbs help man. Our body can heal itself, just sometimes we need assistance. You need some help? GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Our mild detox is quite powerful with its unique blend of 8 different herbs. And if you're looking for more, our non-GMO supplements will help you with different needs you might have. Health should be a top priority. Take care of your health naturally. Log on to GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Give your body a treat. Let the herbs do their thing naturally. Read all the testimonies on the website, GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Sickness and viruses are like intruders. and herbs are like warriors. Let the tea work for you. That's getthetea.com.
9 out of 10 geneticists agree.
Fade to Black is not your father's radio show on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, The Planet.
Hi, this is Chase Klutsky with Fate Magazine Radio, and you're listening to Jimmy Church and Fade to Black on the Game Changer Network and the KGRA digital broadcast station, where the Fade or Nots rock.
Hi, this is Rob Reiner from Anvil, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What's up? I'm Chris. What up? This is Kyle Massey, and you're listening to Jimmy Church Radio.
All right, welcome back. Tonight we have with us Daniel Sheehan. And I want to remind everybody that tomorrow night is another Fader Night with John Rappaport and his No More Fake Newsroom, and that'll be followed by open lines all night long. The call-in number is 323-825-5045. We'll see. You know, whenever we have Danny on the show, we run out of time. So we'll see if we can squeeze in some phone calls tonight. But I have a feeling, I have a crystal ball, that we will have a fully engaged and full conversation tonight. Daniel Sheehan, JD, is a graduate of Harvard Law School, a former director of the Christic Institute, and is a professor of world politics at the University of California. He is the general counsel and co-director for the Institute for Cooperation in Space. And Mr. Sheehan has had a long and distinguished history as a public interest counsel and was legal counsel in the Pentagon Papers case, Iran-Contra, 3 Mile Island, and Karen Silkwood, as well as many other high-profile cases. And he shares the responsibility of the formulation of a new world view, integrating into all of the classical fields of human knowledge, and now the virtually universally accepted fact of the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence in our universe, and the growing accepted fact that the representatives of one or more of these extraterrestrial civilizations are presently visiting our planet and interacting with members of our species. I would like to welcome back our good friend, Daniel P. Sheehan. Danny, good evening, sir.
Hey, Jimmy. How are you?
Man, it is so great to have you on. You know what's weird? I'm nervous in your presence, and I shouldn't be. I shouldn't. But I've got a couple things that I want to jump off with tonight. Number one, I went a few months ago. I'm surfing, and I landed on your Wikipedia page. And it's cool, and it's all of those crazy things that you've been involved with, and but then it ends down at the bottom, and he also speaks about UFOs. Kind of a weird mix there. And when people see that, when they read the first part, Pentagon Papers, 3 Mile Island, it's all there, and it ends with he also speaks about UFOs. How do you feel about that?
Well, it's funny that I think it's one of the most important public policy issues in the world. So that it started basically back when I was at the Jesuit National Headquarters. I was there for 10 years between 1975 and 1985. And in 1977, it was actually just after Jimmy Carter was elected in November of 1976 that I received a call actually from Rosie Chalk, who was the executive secretary of the National Institute of Science, National Academy of Science in Washington, D.C., and she invited me to dinner. I went to dinner with her, and we got all done sort of at the end of the dinner. She said, "Look, do you mind if I ask you a personal question?" She said, what do you think about this issue of extraterrestrial intelligence and UFOs? And I said, well, actually, I think it's one of the most important public policy questions that there is. And she was kind of shocked, and she said, well, really, how come you never said anything about it? And I said, well, nobody ever asked me. And she said, it turns out her good friend, Marcia Smith, is the head of the Science and Technology Division of the Library of Congress, the Congressional Research Service, the service that exists to do research for all the various members of Congress. And she's been contacted now via the Science and Technology Committee of the House of Representatives by President Jimmy Carter, and he wants to have the Congressional Research Service do a major research investigation of the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence, the probabilities of that, and secondly, this issue of UFOs. And so she asked me, Rosie Chalk asked me whether I'd be willing to accept a phone call from Marcia Smith over at the Congressional Research Service, and I said sure. And so Marcia called me, and I went and had lunch with her, and she invited me to become legal counsel to the special study that was being done by the Congressional Research Service for President Carter. At first, what she wanted me to do, she wanted me to contact, since I was chief counsel for the Jesuit national headquarters at the time, and in Washington, and she wanted me to contact the Vatican Library in Rome and see whether or not we could get access to the Vatican Library, the secret archives, to determine what information the Vatican had about the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence and this UFO phenomenon. And so I went back after the lunch, I went back and checked with Father Bill Davis, my superior at the Jesuit headquarters, and we convened our board of directors, the assistant provincials for social justice of the 10 provinces of the United States, and they approved it. So I contacted the Vatican Library by mail, a formal letter on our letterhead at the Jesuit headquarters in the United States, and asked them if I could get permission to take a look at the files in the Vatican Library. And he wrote back and said no.
Right.
And I was surprised. I said, wait a second. I sent them a second letter. I said, you must not understand who we are asking for this. And I told them that President Carter wanted to have us help them with this. And they still said no. So I was kind of disappointed and told Marcia Smith that it wasn't going to work. But shortly thereafter, I guess a matter of a few weeks later, she contacted me again and said that the Congress, the House of Representatives, had cut half of all of the funds for SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, the project at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory here in Pasadena, California. And she wanted to know whether I would go with a number of the astronauts in my capacity as legal counsel for the Jesuit National Headquarters to lobby on behalf of getting the monies reinstated. And so I did. I got clearance to do that from the headquarters, and I went with a number of the astronauts, and we did this, met with the key people on the Hill, and it turns out they ended up putting all the money back into the budget. So the top 50 scientists from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory were ecstatic, and they invited me to come and give them a 3-hour closed-door seminar on the theological implications of contact with an extraterrestrial civilization.
Let me jump in there,
did.
Daniel, real quick. That letter from the Vatican, in saying no, did it imply no, you can't see our UFO stuff, or no, we don't have any UFO stuff? Nope. And there's a difference.
No, they were not going to give us access to the archives. Period. Interesting. And is that, as an attorney, is that how you read it? That they have the stuff?
Yeah,
no. It was just a straight up, that we're not going to make an exception in this case for you to be able to get access to the classified files. Now, since that time, I've had conversations with them. I've been to Rome a number of times, of course.
Right.
And I've met with the head of the Vatican Library, and I've got a new arrangement being worked out recently, as of last month.
Right. And we're gonna get to that too, by the way.
Yeah.
Now,
so that's how it started. So that's how I did it. I ended up going and doing the presentation for the SETI program at JPL. Came back and continued to serve as special counsel to the investigation, and we ended up preparing a report, 2 reports actually, classified reports for President Carter. One on the probabilities of the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence, and secondly, the issue of the UFOs themselves. And we prepared those and gave those, handed those up to President Carter. And that was the end of our job. And I didn't have anything more to do with it, except because of the findings in those 2 reports, I actually made a special presentation to the Washington Interreligious Staff Council, which is the heads of the 54 major offices in Washington, D.C., that are the head offices of the 54 major religious denominations in the United States that have offices in Washington. And I made a proposal to them that we establish a special task force for studying the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence and the UFO phenomenon, asking them to develop a new worldview to take into account this reality. And they just basically just stared at me when I put the presentation. And Judy Stone, who was the head of the NCC at the time, National Council of Churches, just said, "Well, are there any other recommendations that anybody has?" And so they just didn't do it. I mean, they just couldn't get out ahead of the power curve on this thing. And so that it wasn't until 1994. That was like almost 17 years later or something. When I got contacted by Dr. John Mack at Harvard Medical School and was asked to represent him legally over the confrontation that he was having with Harvard University faculty when he wrote his 1994 book, Abductions, Human Contact with Extraterrestrials. And so I got back into it at that time as a lawyer representing him because he was being brought up in front of a completely rump faculty committee that had been organized by the dean of the medical school to try to excoriate him for having published this book, which arose out of a whole series of examinations that he conducted of people, very high-level government officials and military officials and others who had been sent to Harvard Medical School for psychiatric evaluations.
Now,
that's
you
how it started with him.
And what's interesting here is you wrote the book, The People's Advocate.
Yeah.
Are you going to write the UFO Advocate? Is that in the works?
Well, actually, there's two additional books that I've been asked to write by Counterpoint Press in Berkeley. The second one is called Rulers of the Realm, which is a full-scale explication of what is going on behind the scenes, the power elite behind the scenes, kind of pulling the strings of the U.S. government and international organizations. Because in the first book that I did, The People's Advocate, it was just sort of it's a 500-page book, but it's just a kind of a 1 foot deep and 1 mile wide account of a number of the major cases that I've done over 45 years.
Right.
But I hadn't gotten into great depth of the issue of what it is that this all revealed to me over all these years. And that's what I'm doing in the book now called Rulers of the Realm, and which I'm supposed to have done here by the end of the year. And then a third book is going to deal with these other issues of extraterrestrial intelligence, the expansion of a new worldview, et cetera. So it's a trilogy, actually, that I'm writing for Counterpoint Press, and these issues will all be in book 3.
With the way that you look at the world, and I've asked you this question a few times over the years, but today I think that the public is starting to trip on those powers that you're talking about right now. And with your eyes, do you just look around and go, man, you know what? People, listen to me, things are not what they seem to be. Do we have to look at everything that way now?
Well, it's a question of how much depth you want to go into at any given point in time. you can blow right through all structures in kind of a postmodern application of strict logic to virtually everything in scientific materialist evaluation. But right. the bottom line is that I view the whole thing as that our human family is progressively evolving teleologically in a progressive direction, just like Teilhard de Chardin talks about in his works. He's the Jesuit priest who was a paleontologist and discovered Peking man. He laid out a whole series of books. Well, he didn't actually. He sent letters to his sister. He was actually forbidden by the Catholic Church from publishing anything about his theories by actually Ratzinger. Cardinal Ratzinger, who was at that time the head of the Committee on Orthodoxy of the Catholic Church, prohibited him from publishing, along with a number of others, Hans Küng and other writers that are Catholic priests. But Pierre Teilhard de Chardin wrote a whole series of letters to his sister during the 1920s, 1930s, laying out his entire thinking about this. And she published them after he passed away. And these are very famous now and are studied in virtually all of the novitiates of the Jesuit order about the progressive biological evolution of our human species, evolving in a more and more and more sophisticated and complex way to develop higher and higher state of consciousness, which in suggesting that Jesus and Muhammad and Buddha and others of the great prophets are basically mutations, physical, biological mutations that have flashed into existence prior to the time that our entire species will evolve into this higher state. As he was said, Jesus said in the Gospels, he said, that you will at one time come to do greater things than I, and that it is not so important what it is that I say to you, it's what I am. And that these people are, according to Teilhard de Chardin, physical mutations. Like all biological mutations in evolution, they flash into existence prior to the time that the environment is prepared to accommodate them, and that they do not survive because the environment is too hostile to them. And that's what's happened to virtually all of the great mystics, El-Hajj and others. So that what we're really seeing, the way I look at the whole thing, is that our human species has evolved, to an extraordinary extent in the last 10,000 years. And even though we only have access to kind of to the histories going back to 4,000 years BC, but the fact is there have been this whole long progression of the evolution of our human species into the state where we are now means that we're not perfected. We certainly still fall prey to a whole range of the lower angels of our nature. But the fact is there are higher angels of our nature. There are higher chakras in our system, and that we are capable of facilitating the higher and higher vibration of our consciousness to the point where we're able to perceive much more subtle realms of truth. And so that the fact that significant portions of our human family are not at this stage at this present time isn't something that one should become angry about or depressed about. It's just the way things are at the present state of evolution. And what we have to do is try to be of assistance in sharing information and insights in a way that actually can be heard. And that's what the major mission of a lot of the prophets has been, is how do we translate into language that can be really understood and appreciated on the part of the great numbers of people in our human family, these subtle, extraordinary insights that are really the function of a higher state of consciousness. So it's a little bit like trying to explain to someone who is blind, what colors are like, or to explain to someone in writing who is deaf, what music sounds like.
Right.
It's different, and so it's an important challenge for those of us who hope to assist in accelerating the rate of evolution of our human family, so that we don't end up destroying ourselves with thermonuclear weapons, or destroying ourselves with global climate change, or poisoning ourselves with nuclear waste materials. That we've got to do everything that we can to attempt to facilitate the increase and acceleration of the rate of evolution of our human family in this positive direction. That's part of what I see my mission to be. So even though I'm trained at Harvard College in government studies and constitutional law and Harvard Law School and all of that, that I have historically over the last 45 years used the legal cases and litigations and investigations to try to uncover elements of truth that are lying around, basically, that if you just direct your attention to them and devote adequate study to them, you can figure these things out. And what I've been doing is trying to bring them into the forums, the legal forums, in a courtroom where regular people, 12 people selected at random out of the community, can sit down and hear this information. And they will, in fact, when presented the information adequately, will in fact respond in a positive and constructive way. It's why every single one of the cases I've ever done for 45 years, we've won every single one of the cases up until the Iran-Contra case, where the Democratic and Republican Party just joined together to shut down that entire investigation. They did not want it revealed that there was this long-standing enterprise engaged in doing their covert operations.
With you have gone up against the biggest of the big, the Pentagon, the White House, sitting presidents, the energy industry, the nuclear industry, the biggest of the big. And as an attorney, when you do that, what is the difference between a government keeping a secret and the government actually lying? What is the difference from an attorney's point of view?
Well, actually, in 1947, in November of 1947, after the end of World War II, in August of 1945, and over that couple-year period, that the forces of, shall we say, darkness organized themselves very effectively to pass the National Security Act of 1947, creating the Central Intelligence Agency and eventually the National Security Agency and others. And what they did is they superimposed upon the constitutional democratic fabric of our nation the principles of a national security state. They suggested that the Soviet Union was engaged in a quest to basically take over the entire world and subject it to communist ideology. And therefore they had to create a Central Intelligence Agency that was more ruthless and more effective in destroying and subverting their enemies than the Soviet Union. And as soon as that was done, there has proceeded from that point back in 1947 a constant accelerating progression of attempting to curtail the fundamental civil rights of people in our country, all undertaken for the purpose of effectuating the objectives of the major robber baron class in the United States, which has existed ever since the founding of the country, all the way back into 1781 to 1789 with the creation of our American Constitution. Alexander Hamilton was, in fact, the lawyer for major financial, business, and banking interests back then, who was laboring constantly to curtail the kind of individual civil liberties that were going to be enshrined in the Constitution itself. And he was working assiduously to try to establish a centralized bank that would lend money, print money for the government, So this element has been indigenous to the American, Anglo-Saxon culture since the very beginning. But what happened is they came into prominence at the end of World War II, and they institutionalized their power in the Central Intelligence Agency, and then later on in the National Security Agency and DARPA in the Defense Industrial Security Command, and a whole series of other alphabet groups that are many of which are still top secret. But that whole national security state mentality found an institutional base from which to work. And very importantly, they were allied very closely with the right-wing fascist Nazis who they had facilitated helping to escape out of Europe at the end of World War II. But our investigations, all during the Iran-Contra investigation, of the origins of the enterprise, of the off-the-shelf, standalone, self-financing, allegedly private covert operations enterprise, when we delved into the historical origins of that, we discovered that it turns out that the robber barons who ascended to power between 1868, at the end of the American Civil War, up to 1898, just that short 30-year period, 30-year period, just how recently that is. It's just, October 5th, we were talking about before we came on, October 5th today is the 30th anniversary of the shoot-down of the Fat Lady, the C-123, that Eugene Hassenfuss was the kicker for in Sawyer and Cooper, where the pilot and co-pilot was shot down over Nicaragua 30 years ago to today. So that's a fairly short period of time ago. I mean, a substantial majority of the people listening to this conversation here tonight remember that happening. And this 30-year period from 1868 to 1898, that 30-year period was an extraordinarily important period in American history, where a tiny percentage, 1/10 of 1% of the population rose into a position of power by the creation of a new business vehicle, which is the the stockholder-owned corporation. So that the people who actually owned the property of a given business company, were completely immunized against any potential personal legal liability for the conduct of that corporation. The management was completely immunized against any legal liability, and the board of directors were immunized against any legal liability. So that basically it was a business model that gave a green light to the company to do anything that it could possibly do to maximize the profits of their company for the benefit of the shareholders. And yet all of them were immunized against any type of effective deterrent that could be imposed upon their policies by the law. And that's what happened.
Yeah, and we're going to take a break right here. And it became culture, didn't it? It was okay to lie, steal, maybe even kill for the interest of Washington, D.C. and profit. Absolutely incredible. Let's take a break right here. Our guest tonight, Daniel P. Sheehan. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. When we come back after the break, Daniel it was a few months back, but just got back from Rome. We're going to address what went on over there and what has happened since then. And also, we got to talk about the Vatican Observatory right here in the U.S. We'll do all of that next. Our guest, Daniel Sheehan. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We'll be right back.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
The station that talks the net. KGRA Radio.
Hello, and you're listening to my main man, Jimmy Church, on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Hi, this is Ray Hobbs here, repping the planet, and you're listening to my good friend, Jimmy Church, Fade to Black, on the Game Changer Network and the KGRA digital broadcast station.
Angioprim can unclog blocked arteries and improve blood flow in all parts of your body. Angioprim is oral chelation. Easy, simple, liquid oral chelation. You take it with juice before breakfast and forget about it. Angioprim works fast, unlike old-fashioned chelation that takes hours. Just log on to angioprim.com. That's Angioprim, ANGIOPRIM, angioprim.com. Angioprim users say they have more energy, more strength, more endurance. Increased circulation and blood flow will make all your body parts work better. Log on to angioprim.com to get more information on how you can get started and start feeling better, having fun, and doing more again. Lots more. Talk to a trained Angioprim consultant. Call Angioprim toll-free at 877-882-7221. That's 877-882-7221. Or log on for complete information. Angioprim.com. That's Angioprim.com. Find out how Angioprim can work for you. Get the facts about Angioprim at Angioprim.com.
This is Toby Kebbell. You're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com. Don't hurt me, Jimmy. I'm only little.
Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And this is Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers.
Yes.
We're of the Honey Brothers. Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And I'm Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers.
And you're listening to Jimmy Church.
The Revolution.
What's up, Fadernauts? Studio Dome loves Fade to Black and the F2B audience so much that they have put together the ultimate stereo Bluetooth system. They've done it just for you. Man, check this out. The Studio Dome SBB2 stereo system is here. It's featuring two Studio Boombox 2 SBB2 wireless Bluetooth speakers, packed in its own custom hardshell case. This Studio Dome system features the very latest in stereo Bluetooth technology. The two full-range boomboxes are in true wireless stereo. You've got to hear this. It's amazing. It's just $129, and use the promo code JCRTWS, and you'll also get free shipping. It's simple. Just go to JimmyChurchRadio.com, click on the Studio Dome banner. Go Beckley Tepe.
This is Micah Hanks of the Gralien Report, and you're listening to Jimmy Church on Fade to Black, across the globe on the Game Changer Radio Network and the one and only KGRA Radio, The Planet.
All right, welcome back. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, Daniel P. Sheehan. Tomorrow night, John Rappaport will be here. It's Fader night, Thursday night. Open lines all night long. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. You can follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. That's what you want to do. And use the hashtag F2B and come over and jump into the sandbox. Any questions tonight for myself or Danny, just use the hashtag F2BQ. I do see everybody's questions lined up here. And Danny, we mentioned, or you did, the Vatican earlier, and that lined up questions, right? Blah, 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 it's bang, bang, bang. And everybody wants to know, what's going on. Do you have an update for us?
Well, I mean, obviously, the most important single thing that's going on right now is the fact that Francis has been made the Pope, the first Jesuit in the entire history of the 2,000 years of the Church that has ever been made the Pope. And now the Jesuits, it's important to understand that Jesuits are the largest single religious order in the largest single religious community in Western civilization. Now, they had for a long time, they were originally created in 1547 for the purposes of reforming the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church had fallen into a whole series of absolutely atrocious activities, everything from the Inquisition to the selling of indulgences to, you can down the long list, and we all know exactly what those are.
Right.
As a major institution, it had become totally corrupted. And the Jesuit order was established in 1547 to reform the church, to clean up the church, to stop it from doing all that stuff. The problem is that they became captive of the Vatican staff. And the Vatican staff, under the various popes, the College of Cardinals, etc., however corrupt they were at any given point, they ended up drawing the Jesuit order into serving the purposes of the Vatican, as distinct from doing what they were originally created for, which was to reform the entire church. What happened is at the end of World War II, right at this very time, when the Vatican, under the control of Pope Pius XII and his Secretary of State, Cardinal Vio, had not only signed the Concordat with Hitler and Mussolini and Franco, allowing the fascist rise in Europe, but they had actually actively facilitated the escape from Europe in the closing months of World War II in Europe. They facilitated the escape from Europe of hundreds of the top-level Nazi party officials and the heads of the SS. And we all know about this, and they assisted them in escaping through Catholic monasteries, into submarines and taken down to South America, to Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay, and Chile, and they infested that entire area of South America. And at the same time that all of that was going on, what happened is that one of the young Jesuits that was in Spain, a fellow named Pedro Arrupe, he was a medical doctor, a surgeon, and he had decided to become a Jesuit priest, and he became a Jesuit priest, and he was speaking out from the Catholic pulpits against Franco and the fascists, Hitler and Mussolini as well, but really he was in France, so he was or in Spain, so he was going right after Franco. And Franco assigned a team of people to assassinate him. And because of that, and what happened is one of the three assassins that was assigned to assassinate Pedro Arrupe went to confession and confessed about how terrible he was feeling about being given this assignment to kill this priest. And the priest in the confession asked him who this priest was, found out that it was Pedro Arrupe, and then went and told his bishop that this fellow was being targeted for assassination. So they took Pedro Arrupe out of Spain and sent him to Japan, actually, and put him in a Buddhist monastery to hide him out. And there, Pedro Arrupe got into doing Zen meditation. So he would do 3 one-hour Zen sits every day at this monastery, and eventually began to discover the extraordinary benefits of meditation. And it turns out that he was there, and it turns out that he lived in this monastery in the hills above Hiroshima. And so that when the United States dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima on August 6th of 1945, it knocked down the entire monastery, knocked him unconscious. When he awakened inside the rubble, that he could see on the wall of the rubble where it was the clock that had stopped. He crawled out of the rubble and led a team of monks down into the city and helped the people escape from under the mushroom cloud and brought them up into the hills and treated them as a medical doctor. And he vowed at that point that he was going to be dedicated to trying to stop this new horrific weapon from destroying the whole human family. And because of that, he ended up being selected when Vatican II was convened in 1960 by Pope John the 23rd, who convened an entire Vatican Council to try to reform the church. He selected Pedro Arrupe, a Jesuit priest, to head up the Committee on Interfaith Relations because of his familiarity with Buddhism, etc. So he was there in Rome when the superior general of the Jesuit order died, and all of the 100 provincials from around the world gathered in Rome there in 1961 to elect a new superior general of the Jesuit order. And John the 23rd was so pleased with the way that Pedro was functioning as the head of the Committee on Ecumenism that he recommended him to be the new superior general of the Jesuits. Now that, of course, if you're familiar with church politics, that's the kiss of death.
Right.
You know, the Jesuit provincials are not going to select somebody that the Pope wanted to have be the head of the Jesuit order because he would not be adequately independent. So he didn't have any chance of winning and being elected to be the new superior general. But Cardinal Villot, who was the Secretary of State for Pius XII, violated all traditions and went to the conclave of the Jesuit provincials and started buttonholing individual provincials, saying, "Look, you can't possibly vote for this Pedro Arrupe that John the 23rd has recommended. He's a communist. He opposed Franco." And so the Jesuit provincials started saying, well, wait a second here. On third thought, maybe we better take another look at this guy. And they ended up electing him. And so he became the superior general of the entire Jesuit order, this very radical, genuinely spiritual guy. And what he did is when they all went to meet him at the Jesu, which is the big Jesuit international headquarters, which sits immediately next to the Vatican in Rome, they all came to the Jesu to meet him because many of them had never met him personally. And they were expecting to have kind of a social reception with, champagne and hors d'oeuvres and, cigarettes and alcohol and the whole 9 yards. And when they arrived, they came into the Jesu and all the furniture had been removed. And all there was there is 100 Zafu pillows waiting for them. And there was Pedro Arrupe sitting on a Zafu pillow in a Zen meditation, waiting for all of them to come and sit down. And so they all came in and had to take their shoes off, and they were going, where are the ashtrays? Where are the
shot glasses? Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's right. And so they all basically ended up taking their shoes off and sitting down on these Zafu pillows. And he opened his eyes, and when they all were settled, and he said, "I have seen the end times. I was there," he said. And unless we start right from this day forward to try to join together to deconstruct the structural sources of injustice, both in Western civilization and in Eastern civilization, our human family is going to destroy ourselves with these new atomic weapons. And that what we need to do is we need to organize ourselves into a major cadre to bring about social justice on the planet. And one of the major objectives is reforming genuinely the Catholic Church, to have it become a major vehicle for spiritual enlightenment. And he said, but many of you here, these 100 provincials, are not ever going to be prepared to do this. You drink alcohol, you smoke cigarettes, you have terrible practice. Half of you have mistresses, which is going to compromise you, that people can blackmail you. So I'm going to have to replace a number of you. But when I do, I'm going to call all 100 provincials back into Rome for a conclave so that we're going to set forth how we're going to do this. Well, it turns out that he called all of the Jesuit provincials back into Rome in 76 actually. In 1974. In 1974, when I was at Harvard Divinity School. I had already graduated from Harvard College, and Harvard Law School was out practicing law and did the Pentagon Papers case, and the case that established the right of journalists to protect their confidential news sources. I did Eisenstadt versus Baird, which struck down as unconstitutional the laws prohibiting birth control information being given to unmarried people. Did Attica Prison. I'd done all of those cases. But because of the major confrontation I was having with the partners at the Cahill-Gordon firm on Wall Street, and then with F. Lee Bailey in his office, I ended up going back to the Divinity School at the recommendation of the head of the Department of Philosophy, John Rawls. And so I was there doing my master's work and then PhD work in comparative social ethics. And I ended up getting recruited to actually go to become the legal counsel for the Jesuits to implement these new social justice documents that they were preparing in Rome. And that's what happened. They prepared a whole set of what they called the 32nd General Congregation. It was only the 32nd General Congregation of all 100 provincials in the world. And every other time the first 31 of those congregations were there solely to select a new superior general of the Jesuit order. This one was the first and only one convened to address policies, and that they came up with a whole set of documents which are advocating, saying that it is the obligation of every single newly ordained Jesuit priest to devote the same kind of energy to every single day to the deconstructing of the structural sources of injustice, and it is an equal obligation to the preaching of the Mass each day. Now, that's a profound and fundamental change that happened in the Jesuit order. And I would recommend to everybody that's listening ought to run out and get a copy of a book that's called The Jesuits, The Betrayal of the Holy Roman Catholic Church. It's a book written by Malachi Martin, a totally disgruntled, extremely conservative, former Jesuit priest.
He's a cool dude.
That's right. He became totally indignant about the changes that had been developed inside the church. In the Jesuit order, he said the Jesuit order had abandoned the sole legitimate mission of the Catholic Church, which is solely to assist individuals in getting to heaven, and that they had instead become the point of the spear of the social justice movement on the planet. Okay, now that's a fundamental and profound critique on the part of a right-wing reactionary person criticizing the Jesuit order.
But
I give that book to everybody.
And it sounds good, and changes were made, but they still said no to you in that letter.
Oh, right. What they had done is they said no, they were not opening up the secret Vatican files for me to look at about that.
Have you been in the basement? Have you been into, how far have they let you go into the vaults?
Well, what it is I have had a series of discussions now with the new head of the Vatican Library.
Right.
And what I've been asked to do is I've been offered access to the files, the entire set of files on the pontificate of Pope Pius XII.
Wow.
Who signed the Concordat with the Nazis and the fascists? Because there's a major effort is underway right now to purge the entire Vatican and Catholic Church
what do you
fascist elements
really?
That are in the church.
Now, I mean, that's got to be so deeply rooted. Do you think that's possible? I understand the intent, but.
Yes. Oh yes, it's true because the fact of the matter is that there has been ever since October of 1917, in the revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution in the Soviet Union, or in Russia, and then the creation of the Soviet Union. There has been a constant war has been waged by the capitalists in Western civilization, these robber barons, that they have waged a major war trying to destroy the Bolshevik and the socialist and communist revolution in the Soviet Union. Immediately after the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, the United States Secretary of State, Robert Lansing, who was the Secretary of State for Woodrow Wilson, ordered the sending in of a United States-led foreign military expeditionary force into Russia, which nobody talks about. They don't tell you about it. They don't teach you about it in school. They didn't even teach us about it at Harvard College.
Right.
But in fact, I found out about this, and they sent an entire major foreign expeditionary force into Russia to try to crush the Bolshevik Revolution in the cradle. So that was started right from the very beginning. And so that this dialectical confrontation that's been going on between world socialism and world capitalism has been going on since that time. And so therefore the failures of the Soviet Union, which are myriad, the totalitarianism, the authoritarianism, the atheism That what they did is they turned and looked at the church and they said, look, here's a whole series of terrible things that the church has done. And Marx believes that religion is the opiate of the masses. And let's get rid of the whole thing. Under the point of lining up priests and nuns and gunning them down, right in the churches. I mean, it was just a terrible thing to happen under Stalin. And so that what happened here is that the people in the Catholic Church who saw the Soviet Union under Stalin as being a major force of conscious atheism and attacking in the churches all throughout Russia, in the Soviet Union, that what they did is they recoiled against that and they started joining forces with the fascists. Including Hitler. And you remember Hitler was constantly saying that the reason that he was setting up the whole Third Reich was fundamentally to oppose communism. That's what he said. He was the bulwark against Bolshevism in Europe. And if we back up one step, that is why he was financed by George Herbert Walker and the partners at Brown Brothers Harriman and the lawyers, the senior partners at Sullivan and Cromwell, the major law firm in New York on Wall Street. They set up the Union Bank of New York in 1934 and started actively funding the rise of the Third Reich in Germany to establish them as the bulwark against Bolshevism in Europe. And what happened is that Pius XII and Cardinal Vio and the others inside the Vatican all ended up aligning with those types of forces of reaction. And in exchange for that, Mussolini, lifted the ban on the Vatican owning the Vatican State and reinstated the Vatican State and released them from the debt that they owed to the Italian state, paying back taxes that had been imposed upon the church. So this whole thing that happened generated, as your question is suggesting, a deep-set kind of attachment to fascism in the hierarchy of the Catholic Church. And what's going on now is that Pedro Arrupe, remember, was an anti-fascist. He was an anti-fascist spokesperson speaking out from the pulpits against Franco and Hitler and Mussolini. And so that he, in fact, organized the entire Jesuit order when he became the Superior General in 1961, that he organized the entire Society of Jesus to not become socialists, not to become communist, as is suggested by these fascists, but he is trying to find a middle way between authoritarian communism and authoritarian capitalism. And the capitalists keep on advertising themselves as democratic capitalism. They keep talking about it all the time. But the fact of the matter is, we know that the two-party system in the United States has been taken over by the capitalists and by their corporations and the funding of the parties now, and with the new decision from the United States Supreme Court, now authorizing corporations to donate money directly to campaigns. The fact of the matter is that we see, respectively, 54% of the people don't want Hillary Clinton, and 58% of the people don't want Donald Trump, but they can't get other viable candidates because of the structure that the capitalist corporations have imposed upon the country in the two-party system. But in criticizing, state capitalism that is dominant in the United States is not to in any way or any stretch of the imagination to endorse Stalinist type communism. Those became caricatures. The two of them became caricatures of their respective worldviews. And what the Jesuit order is trying to do now under Francis is trying to establish a new, completely different form of economics. He's trying to figure out how to have a democratic participation in governance, to have a more egalitarian sharing of the resources of the planet, to do away with the state capitalist economic system, which he completely, explicitly condemns, in his papal encyclical, Laudato Si, which is the papal encyclical from June of 2015, on global climate change. He said that the proximate causation of global climate change is transnational corporate capitalism.
Well, do you buy what Francis is selling now? I mean, I get that the Pope Mobile is now a Fiat, right? I get that. But do you think he drives around the corner and jumps in a Merc? Do you buy what Francis is selling?
No, I know the guy. I mean, a month ago, I was sitting at the next table to him at dinner.
Right.
I know the guy, and I know his history. I know his history in Argentina. I know the guys around him. I know of Sean O'Malley. I know Cardinal Turkson. And I've met Gallagher, who is the number 2 guy in the Secretary of State's office. And I'm going to get to know more of them. So I'm working on behalf of the people, I believe, as the people's advocate, to find out what's going on inside the Catholic Church now, to try to determine whether or not this huge public relations activity that is engaged in on the part of Francis, that is causing more and more and more people all around the world to turn around and take a second look and say, wait a second, maybe there is something good about what the Catholic Church is trying to do now. They're still falling way short on issue of women's rights and contraception, and there's a whole series of things that we still got to deal with here. But the same thing is true of our country. People say, oh, holy mackerel, how can you possibly tolerate being in the United States? They've invaded the Middle Eastern oil fields. They invaded Vietnam. They're engaged in, supporting fascist governments all through Central America and South America. All of that's true. But our job as American citizens and people who believe in the Constitution and the theory of democracy, our job is to stand and fight, is to not tolerate this being eroded step by step by these, robber barons, that came to power, in that 30-year period between 1868 and 1898. And it's, the same thing is true with regard to the Catholic Church. It's our job to stand and fight, to not allow the Catholic Church to continue to be dominated by fascists, and misogynists and racists. And the same thing is true of our government. The government is the American government is fundamentally racist, fundamentally misogynist. We're working like mad in our generation on our watch to try to lift our human family and our various institutions up into the higher ideals that they profess. Now, what it does is it gives us an opportunity to call them out. When you compare and contrast what is being done, by not only both of the Bush administrations, but also by the both Clinton administrations as soon as she's elected, and even the Obama administration. When you see what they're really doing, it's so contrary to the fundamental promises that have been made to us all in the Constitution. And we've all been taught this in our high school civics and in our courses on American history. We have the right and the responsibility to make true what all these promises are. And we have a great advantage over the other side because they themselves in their institutions publicly endorse and espouse the very principles that we're talking about here, so that we can mobilize our people just like a jury. When you can get over the top of the judge and over the top of the government attorney, and you get right to the jury, and you put the facts in front of them and explain to them what the fundamental principles are that we all have come to agreement about, they will apply those principles to the facts, and they will, in fact, come out with the right decision every single time.
Let me jump in right there. We'll take a break. Perfect spot to take a break. And our guest tonight, sorry about that, is Daniel P. Sheehan. And Danny, when we come back, this is what I want you to think about. You're going to be given this opportunity to go into the archives, to go deep into the library, especially on the UFO subject. What book do you pull first? We'll talk about that next. This is Fade to Black. Our guest, Daniel P. Sheehan. Stay with us.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church.
You're listening to Fade to Black.
Always on the edge of the hottest alternative talk. Jimmy Church with Fade to Black. KGRARadio.com.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Work with your doctor when taking medications. Make Protovite part of your healthy lifestyle.
HealthForLiberty.com is your source for Protovite, a powerful nutritional supplement that's a true breakthrough for your health. Poor digestion makes it nearly impossible to absorb the nutrition your body needs. Protovite is a liquid multi-nutrient formula with patent-pending absorption technology and the highest quality ingredients to nourish every cell in your body.
My name is Sandra White. 6 weeks ago, when I started taking Protovite, I was on 14 medications, from everything for blood pressure to fibromyalgia. In the first 10 days, my blood sugar dropped 50 points, and my fibromyalgia pain is gone. And so was 12 of the 14 medications that I was taking. I'm 66, living life and loving it.
Go to healthforliberty.com right now. That's healthforliberty.com.
Thank you, Protovite, for giving my life back.
You are listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Oi, oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
Welcome back, Fade to Black. Our guest tonight, Daniel Sheehan, the people's advocate. I say the UFO advocate, but that's just me. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Hashtag F2B is the sandbox. Questions for myself or Mr. Sheehan during the show tonight. Hashtag F2BQ. Now, Danny, right before the break, I suggested here, you know, they're going to honor what they say and give you access. You got free reign. They open the doors and you go. What do you seek out first? What information do you go for first and why?
No, it's not that I have free reign yet. What I've been asked to do is to potentially review all of the internal secret documents in the Vatican pertaining to the pontificate of Pope Pius XII. It goes all the way back into his service in the Secretary of State's office, and when he first came into the Vatican before he was Pope and all of that. And what I'm going to try to do is to undertake a completely objective and neutral evaluation of the pontificate of Pius XII to determine, whether or not the decision that he made to sign the Concordat with Germany and to refrain from intervening in the persecution of the Jewish people, etc., that to try to determine what the rationale was that was being articulated inside the Vatican for doing something that was as transparently contradictory to the basic values of Judeo-Christian ethics. How is it that they rationalize that? So that there's two major attempts going on right now. One is to universally castigate Pope Pius XII because of these things. And yet there's a major effort that's underway on the part of Opus Dei and the Knights of Malta and other kind of more reactionary fascist elements in the church to get him made a saint. And so that what we need to do is we need to have some person who is objective, who has a long history of being able to do investigations, to dig out information, to be even-handed in the analysis of trying to understand what the implications are of these facts. And so I happen to have been contacted and am in the process of being invited to do this. I've been asked to write a major letter to the editor of the New York Times advocating the opening of the files so that I can review these things. And so those are the files that I'm going to be looking at.
Well, what
I want to be able to do is I want to be able to demonstrate through that type of work that there are great benefits to be had by everyone to allow this information to become known now. That the church is on the verge of losing all of its credibility over this issue of the sexual abuse cases, all these things, and so that they're losing priests hand over fist. They're having to close churches. The parishes in all of California, in New York, in New Jersey, and Massachusetts are all having to combine parishes now and close churches. This is a very critical stage for them right now. And what I'm hoping to do is, as the former chief counsel for the Jesuit National Headquarters, is to assist the Jesuit order in doing exactly what it is that they were originally created for, which is to reform the Catholic Christian Church. And it was in that context that I was invited to go to Moscow and meet with the Metropolitan from the Russian Orthodox Church. It was in that context I was invited to go into Kiev and meet there with the Metropolitan and the people in the Ukrainian Church, because there's this entire shadow play going on, as you know, right now, of the Western powers, basically led by the United States and the Obama administration, and soon to be the Clinton administration, to basically surround the Soviet Union by moving in and having all of the virtually all of the republics that had been part of the Soviet Union become members of NATO. They're trying to close off Russia from their only warm water port in Crimea. That's what's going on right now. There's this huge strategic move that's underway right now, the details of which were elucidated very clearly in the 1992 United States Defense Department Policy Planning Guidance document that was prepared by Paul Wolfowitz and under Dick Cheney when he was Secretary of Defense for George H.W. Bush. That we know what their post-war plan is. And the invasion and occupation of the Middle Eastern oil fields is just one of the pieces of this. The other one is to surround and contain the Soviet Union, and to if they can cut them off from their warm water port, so that the American oil companies can have exclusive monopoly control over developing the oil reserves in the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea, to have to send them down into the Indian Ocean through a pipeline originally planned to be put through Afghanistan. But they couldn't get the Taliban government to agree to that, so they invaded Afghanistan, and they're trying to get another pipeline to put in through Pakistan now. All of that is being coordinated basically by the Carlyle Group, which is a group of private investors, which include George H.W. Bush and James Baker III and others. It's a shadow play of Brown Brothers Harriman that actually existed, back in the 1890s all the way up into the 1960s. Brown Brothers Harriman was the coven, the little nest in which all of these people hung out, from John D. Rockefeller to J.P. Morgan to the Harrimans and the Rockefellers. All of them were private members. They were clients, private investment clients of a firm called Brown Brothers Harriman. And the CEO of it was George Herbert Walker, who was the grandfather of George Herbert Walker Bush. The legal counsel for them was Allen Dulles. And that's why Allen Dulles was made the first civilian director of the Central Intelligence Agency after the passage of the National Security Act of 1947. If you look at these things and you study them carefully enough, you can tell what's going on here. So what I'm trying to do is that the Catholic Church in Western civilization has the potential only, of playing a very significant, positive, and constructive role. If we can help facilitate bringing the Eastern Orthodox Church back into union with the Latin Rite Church in Rome, if we can get the Protestant denominations, if we can get the Catholic Church to recognize the legitimacy of the complaints on the part of the Protestant denominations that were directed against the Catholic Church, or the Lutheran critiques, etc. If we can to actually have a higher spiritual, a genuinely spiritual calling rise up again in the spiritual community of the Jewish community and Christian community, and reach out to the Islamic community and Western civilization as well, if we can mobilize the genuinely spiritual beings on the planet, the people of faith, the people who have faith that our human family is evolving biologically in a progressive direction, and that we're becoming a higher and higher consciousness, that if we can facilitate that process and accelerate that process through the utilization of the institutions that are available to us, in the same way that we can promulgate the individual liberties and freedom of speech and religion, etc., that are enshrined in the Constitution. There are certain institutional tools and resources that we have at our hands here as a generation that have now become adults. Finally, the baby boomer generation, as you know, has had the most protracted adolescence of any generation in the history of humankind, and that we're now fully adults. The senior class of the baby boomers, who are now getting set to celebrate our 50th anniversary.
Right.
Our graduation university are just starting now. That we need to look at the structures that exist, the institutional structures that exist, that are available, and see whether or not they can be salvaged, and that whether or not there's enough of the original value in those institutions to make them useful in carrying into effect the stated mission of all of them, to bring democracy and freedom and happiness and mutual prosperity to our whole human family. Now, all of those, that's the mission that we have right now. And as I said at the top of the show, I'm in the process now of writing the second of the three books, which is called Rulers of the Realm, to lay out in specific detail what the nature of the challenge is that we're faced with, to stop, deceiving ourselves and not understanding what the real challenges are that we face. But on the other hand, once you identify the crisis that we're in true form, then you dispel a lot of these mythologies that are going on around. I mean, that a lot of the people in the progressive community, tend to attribute much higher levels of competence to these guys than they deserve.
Well, and what's interesting,
I've taken these guys on and beaten them repeatedly, and they get up and put their pants on one leg at a time. These guys, and once you can isolate them and show who they really are, you can dispel some of these kind of more hysterical mythologies about what they're doing.
Well, and where does the misunderstanding start? In that we can go back 1,500 years ago and 1,000 years ago with religion and the Vatican especially, spreading disinfo and moving consciousness and people in a certain direction. And today we have the same situation going, and you just referred to that. Is that when we talk about the powers, is it them controlling the media that has got us so out of whack right now? Where does the disinfo start?
Not only the media, Jimmy, but the educational institutions. Rudolf Steiner once said very correctly, I think, is that if you allow the state to be in charge of the education of the young, they will use that to indoctrinate the youth into supporting the state and in supporting the people that run the state. And that's what's happened in our public education system. Our education system is not training people to be creative thinkers, to be original thinkers, to really try to fulfill the ideals of the missions of our institutions.
Right.
What they're doing is they're training the people to become cogs in the machine. And you're taught not to challenge the principal at the school, not to question your teachers. You don't question your coaches. You don't question the fact that your school is being trained to demonize the town that's next door because you happen to play football against them.
Right.
You don't allow your cheerleaders to go out with any of their ball players. I mean, this type of atavistic, competitive, confrontational training that is going on in the schools is got to be changed. And the same thing is true in the Soviet Union. You let the Soviet Union run the education system there, and they're indoctrinating all of their people, into believing that the Soviet Union is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Our generation has to mobilize. We are the largest and the best educated generation in the entire history of the human family. And the millennial generation is the second largest generation and the second best educated generation in the entire history of the world. That we together, our two generations, constitute the overwhelming majority of people in the world right now. And that our generation, the boomer generation, born between February 3rd of 1943 all the way up to November 22nd of 1963, that entire generation, of 82 million people in the United States, it needs to join together with the millennial generation, which is 75 million people, to join together to mobilize. The boomer generation is an idealist generation, and the millennial generation is a classic civic generation that is going to be challenged by having to come to grips with the major crisis that is falling upon us now of global climate change. We know that that's what it is. The last major crisis was the economic depression in World War II. This major crisis of the 21st century is going to be global climate change. And our two generations have to join together. And I would recommend strongly that everybody who's listening actually read the papal encyclical that Francis wrote on global climate change. He starts out saying, look, global climate change is real. All of this fictionalizing on the part of the oil companies and major corporations of asserting that it's open to question, you can't really tell whether it's true or not. He says that is not true. He said that the global climate change is actually happening. And the fact of the matter is that the proximate causation of global climate change is transnational corporate capitalism, and that the need for that particular form of economic development and distribution to carnivorize the resources of the planet, to constantly suck them into the maw of the capitalist system in order to generate more and more profits and ongoing profits for their shareholders. And he said that, and not only that, but the capitalist monopolists, they have in fact generated a complete system of turning people in their own consciousness into consumers, so that they believe that the only real reflection of their true value is what they own. And how wealthy they are, and how much material goods they can acquire. He said, and they've backed that with an entire worldview, which is postmodern deconstruction. Right. Okay, and so he lays this all out.
But isn't that too big? Isn't that too big of a bite? Even for the Vatican, isn't he going up against something that is almost too big?
No. It's not too big. The fact that people have said that to me in the cases that I do, they keep saying, "Wait a second, you know,
right,
you're going
right.
way overboard here." You know, you're trying to. Are you kidding? Are you trying to get the New York Times to publish a top secret classified study of 47 volumes, completely revealing the lies about the Vietnam War? Can you possibly think you could ever achieve that? The answer is yes, you can. You know, you're taking on the entire nuclear industry in the Karen Silkwood case. Are you kidding? They've invested
right.
billions and billions of dollars in these facilities. You can't. There's 103 of these things they built. They plan to build 200 more. There's billions and billions of dollars at stake. Don't you realize what they'll do to you if you try to do that? You know, look at Jimmy. Nobody gets out of life alive. Okay, so there's nothing they can do to you. They can
right.
kill you. You know, we all know, I think perfectly rationally, that reincarnation is a reality, and we'll reincarnate again and have another go at this. But the fact of the matter is, in our particular incarnation at this particular point in time, you know, in our 4 generations that are alive at this particular time in history, you know, this is our watch. And we cannot be overwhelmed or intimidated by the scale of what the challenges that we're faced with, but we have to be real about what it is. And Francis has come to grips with this, has laid it out in his entire encyclical. And he said that, look, we have to deal with this entire postmodern worldview that has used a scientific logical positivism and materialistically grounded rationality into deconstructing every single worldview that places any kind of ultimate value on individual human beings.
Well, look, this is the thing, and coming from Francis, he's there in Rome, the Vatican, the very country that is so based on icon. I'll give you an example. Right now, Ferrari, one of the biggest brands in the world, right? Of excess, right? I mean,
absolutely.
You know, and that's what he's going up against. I mean, the foundation
and the Lamborghini.
Right.
Sure.
I mean,
profligate materialism. You know, in the you can see we're right on the right point, because you look at those commercials for those cars, and you can tell that they're pitching the fact that your self-image is completely attached to your car.
That's right. I want one.
So the vehicle
it's
that you
effective.
drive is who you are.
Right.
And they do the same thing for your home, and whether you own the right appliances, and whether you have your membership in the right clubs. You know, that and this is what Francis is pointing out in his encyclical. He's saying, look, we have to thoroughly get our arms around what the nature and scope of this problem is if we're going to solve it. You know, it's just like I guess Senator Kane said last night in the debate with in the vice presidential debate, when he was talking about the situation that obtains in the major cities in the country now of this antagonistic relationship between the black community and the police in their communities. He said, look, we have to come to grips with the racial bias that infests virtually every one of the major police departments. And what's it said? The Republican guy said, "Oh, are you suggesting that the police departments in our country are actually implicitly racist?" And what Kane said is, look, if you don't honestly identify the problem, you're never going to be able to solve it. You see, and that's what I'm saying, is that the reason I'm doing book 2 is to identify the problem of the rulers of the realm and the robber barons and the dynamic that is developed between nation-state-based Caucasian state capitalism, you know, versus an authoritarian type of completely secular and atheistic communist authoritarianism. You know, this type of a dialectic is nothing more than a simple manifestation of the dialectical worldview, you know, of Hegel. You know, that there's a thesis and an antithesis, that there is no way that we can get at. He cites Kant to suggest that there's no way that in our conditioned state of material incarnation we can actually discern truth. So all we have is our own relative thesis, and the thesis can be projected out, and it will generate an antithesis, and the two of them will struggle together, and because neither one of them is absolutely correct, they'll combine to form a synthesis that will become its new own operating thesis. This fixation with a dialectic confrontation is fostered and promoted every single day on television. The football teams, everybody has their own football team.
Right.
How ridiculous is this? Millions and millions of people sitting there every Sunday afternoon watching the red team play the blue team, chasing a leather pigskin ball up and down the field.
Opium for the masses.
So what I'm saying, and advertising junk food during the commercials and pharmaceuticals. And so what I'm saying is that you just have to step back a few steps from this to be able to see what it is that's happening here.
Yeah,
okay?
And some do all three at the same time. They do the pharmaceuticals, exactly right. Watch football, and eat Doritos.
That's to eat burritos and drink beer and drive fast cars and get women with big breasts, to come and follow you around. I mean, that's what, and then they advertisements for the military.
It doesn't sound so. It doesn't sound so bad.
It doesn't sound so bad. No, but it's like what Ronald Reagan said.
Right.
What is all this talk about a black problem? I remember when there wasn't even any black problem.
Yeah.
And that's why people in the United States, they need to understand that the suffering that is being inflicted upon people around the world by the policies that we're pursuing, of invading the Middle Eastern oil fields and toppling all of those governments and setting forth the chaos that is reigning there now with tens of hundreds of thousands of people having to flee massive destruction that's being rained down upon them, by these what do they call those machines that kill people from the sky, the drones. This is terrible what's happening now, and so what we've got to do is we've got to sit down, be quiet, sit down, breathe deeply. Do your meditation. Let yourself get to a point where the chichurari in your brain stops chewing away at your consciousness. Find your center. Eat healthy food, and do 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes at night before you go to bed. And what happens is you start to ascend to a place of quiet where you start to have an experience of unconditioned consciousness. And from this perspective of an unconditioned consciousness that is not being distorted by your secular training, your nationalistic training, your genetic predispositions, your astrological predispositions, all of these things that are basically driving you as a pre-programmed machine. You need to. There is a secret. There is an open secret directly in our face that is being taught to us by all of the prophets, that are telling you that there is a secret to becoming unchained from this terrible machine. And you sit and do your meditation in the morning and in the night, and then you get up and you come into the world and you do your work, and you have an unconditioned, a growingly unconditioned perspective on what's going on, and you will dare speak it. You don't have to speak it with rage or fury or judgment against people. What you have to do is say, look, this is where we are right now, and this is why we're here where we are. Here are the steps that others are taking to make these things happen. Here are the concrete steps we need to take to try to redress it. Here are the institutions that we have available to us. Are they salvageable? Do they need to be replaced? How can we modify them? How can we make them function pursuant to the promises that they were originally created to fulfill? How do we do this? And that we need to mobilize our people. The people that are listening right now are now part of this whole conversation. How do we go about doing this? That's why we established the Christic Institute to begin with. Christic coming from Teilhard de Chardin. He said that there is a Christic force that is functioning in the universe, that is drawing consciousness up into more and more complexification and into a higher and higher state of consciousness. There's something going on in the universe if you can calm yourself down enough to discern it. It's a very subtle phenomenon that is functioning in the universe.
Yeah, it's happening. It's happening right now, Daniel.
That's right.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Every single ultimately irreducible integer in the entire universe is bonded and attracted to every other one. It's like magnetism. It's like like gravity.
We'll be right.
All we have to do is discern it.
We got to take a break right here. We'll be right back with Daniel Sheehan. Stay with us.
Hi, everybody. This is Rob Halford, the Metal Guard on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
KGRA Radio. Intelligent Talk.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on the smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store. So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on the smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
If your home has hard water, then it's likely that limescale is clogging your pipes, damaging your appliances, costing you hundreds of dollars each year. You can eliminate limescale in the entire house with HydroCare products available at Wave Home Solutions. Easy and efficient with no maintenance, no salts, no chemicals, and no coils. And you can buy with confidence from Wave Home Solutions. Performance guaranteed. Just go to bestwater411.com. That's bestwater411.com.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of Fade to Black by just calling 605-562-4482. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Just call 605-562-4482. You can listen to me, Jimmy Church, on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Go Beckley Tappy.
You want to know a secret? I love ponies. I really love ponies. I'm serious. I couldn't stay sane without ponies to brush.
Why Fade to Black? Because you never got that pony, damn it.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
All right, welcome back. Fade to Black. I'm in the Danny Sheehan trance right now. I was just jumping in the chat rooms and Twitter there during the break. I'm in the trance. Must get more Danny. Must get more Danny. Hey, this is what's crazy, Daniel, if I may. I take so many phone calls per month, whether here on Fade to Black or over at Coast to Coast, and that's what I do, phone calls. And I'm going to tell you, man, it's probably 8 out of 10, and that's a high number, are about disclosure. That the D word, because of the efforts of you and others out there, and, you know, of course, this show too as well, pushing it. Now, we've been effective with our audience, but I think we've caused some impatience now too as well. The big D word, every phone call I get, you know, okay, Jimmy, when's it going to happen? You know, when do I get to open up my gift? When do we unwrap this present? Where are we? Where are we, Daniel? What's going on with disclosure?
Oh, there's a couple of important things to say about this. That Randy Kopang, who's a very dear friend of mine, who has been to virtually every one of the MUFON meetings, to every one of the international congresses, UFO congresses, to all of these, and he's read every one of the books. He says, "Look, you got to really get it. That disclosure is going on, and it's been going on ever since 1947. That the reason that we know as much as we know about the ET phenomenon and the UFO phenomenon is because there have been periodic releases of information. Various people are being given access to information, and different people who have had access to information are suddenly showing up talking about it. And so that there is a process going on, and Randy Kopang is writing a book right now about this, basically saying, look, don't be silly. Disclosure is happening right in front of you. You can't watch a whole evening of television without seeing at least 2 or 3 movies on about extraterrestrial intelligence, commercials on showing little green men and UFO stuff. That this is happening all the time. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, do not expect, Hillary Clinton to, when she's elected, in November, to come into office on January 21st of 2017 and say, oh, look, by the way, let me open up the files for you and show you everything that we know about extraterrestrial intelligence and UFOs. That's not going to happen. Okay, what we have to do is we have to come to grips with the fact that we cannot rely upon government to reach out and spoon feed us this reality.
Why is she out there talking about it? Is she trying to get the UFO vote? I mean, what?
Well, no. What it is that John Podesta is talking about it, and they're stirring it up. That one of the things they're trying to do is that they know that 70% of the entire baby boom generation and probably 80% or more of the millennial generation all are very interested in this subject. So that she doesn't want to look like a complete troglodyte, and just go, that's not that. So she's saying, that's very interesting stuff, and they're going on Jimmy Kimmel's show and they're promoting this whole thing. But she's not going to do that. I mean, Hillary Clinton is a promoter of the second iteration of the 1992 United States Defense Department policy guidance document, proposing full spectrum dominance in the world. Of establishing major Western power, this new alliance that they call the Northern Industrial Alliance is the actual term of art they use in their classified documents about this. And it includes the United States, Canada, Mexico, not the indigenous people of Mexico, but the the Castilian Spanish, the Caucasian Mexican elite, the UK, France, and Italy and Spain, and the new reunified Germany. And they actually proposed in the second document, the second iteration of that, which was called the Projection of U.S. Military Power into the 21st Century and Beyond, co-authored by George Herbert Walker Bush himself and Theodore Shackley, the head of covert operations for the CIA under George Bush, when he was the director of the agency from 75 to 77. That they co-authored this, and they propose that this alliance be established, and that they invite Russia to come in and join this new Northern Industrial Alliance, quote, now that they have spun off all of their ethnic provinces. Okay, so you can see that this is basically the same type of world plan that was being proposed through Germany back during World War II.
Things don't change, do they? They just
no. Well,
they don't change.
They can change. They can change, but one of the things that causes the other side to be as effective as they are is that they are consistent. They're consistent, and they keep on coming after you. They're like the Terminator.
Well, why tease us?
Yeah,
why tease us? Why use Podesta? And why have Hillary say the things that she's saying? And Obama and Bill. I mean, why tease us?
Because it's going to be extremely important for our human culture to start to prepare for the discovery of an extraterrestrial intelligence. It's going to be the way that they're going to do this, in my opinion, Jimmy, is they're doing it through the space-based telescopes. That they're saying, oh, look, suddenly we're discovering that, yes, there are planets around other stars.
Right.
Oh, look, there's actually planets around virtually every star.
Right.
Oh, look, many of them have planets in the so-called Goldilocks zone. Oh, look, here are planets that are made out of hard rock material just like our Earth. Oh, look, there's all these Earth-like planets. And what they're going to do is they're going to discover the atmosphere of a number of these different planets that is close enough to that like on the Earth, of saying, oh, look, this is very much an Earth-like atmosphere. And then they're going to say, oh, look, we found this other planet that not only has an Earth-like atmosphere, but there's indications that there may be additional oxygen being generated into the atmosphere from periodic surveys of this, indicating that there's some sort of organic life form on this planet. And then they're going to come up and they're going to say, oh, look, we've discovered evidence of a microbiotic life form, under the ice of a sea on a distant planet. And what they're doing is they're feathering in this stuff one step at a time. They've now designed a perfect archetype by means of which they can do this through the discovery of each of one of these new planets. And that they're eventually going to say, oh, look, we've actually found now a primitive aquatic life form. And then, we've discovered something similar to or analogous to a reptilian type of stage of biological evolution. And they're eventually going to come to discovering another intelligent civilization. And then they're going to discover, very important, this is the one they're working on up to, and that is another highly intelligent, highly technologically developed, but distinctly non-human civilization that may be millions of years more advanced than we, technologically, and in their consciousness. And the thing is that the people that are in charge of holding on to power and control, not only over the natural resources of our planet, but the economic institutions, the political institutions, they're so into this control because they're first and second paradigm worldview adherents. The first paradigm worldview adherents, live in stark terror of losing control. They think that the entire universe is out of control and that they can't discern any kind of normal functioning systems in the universe, and that they stand out beneath the stars at night and look up into the sky in terror because they feel alone and abandoned in the universe. And that's because of the state of their biological, physiological state of evolutionary development.
Right.
And it's not their fault. They just can't experience it. And not only that, but they're adamantly certain that it's not true for them. And so therefore, they insist it's not true for anybody else, that they can discern actual, more subtle, unitive phenomenon that function in the universe.
Okay.
Those of us who stand out beneath the stars at night and look up and pick out a star and see it throbbing in the universe and just stand in awe of this extraordinary creation that's going on here, and are certain that there's other life civilizations in other places. We feel perfectly comfortable with that, but they don't feel comfortable about that because it threatens ultimately their control over everything. It ultimately threatens their sense of existence, and they feel threatened by all of this.
And who's the second group?
The second group is the second paradigm group, which are the dialecticians. The first paradigm, the first adherents to the first paradigm worldview, since they can't discern any kind of unitive phenomenon in the world at all, because they're completely convinced that only the five senses is all that we have. And you can see, touch, taste, and feel, and do all these kind of things. But therefore, all of reality is just the material reality that they can see and touch and taste and feel, and is subject to discernment through their own five senses. And that they believe that there is chaos, and that therefore they have to assert their will to superimpose order on what otherwise is a completely chaotic reality. Okay, and that's why they do it. And the mode of political theory that is underlying this is authoritarianism. Is you have an elite, powerful governing elite that impose power on the planet and establish order. Okay, the second paradigm people are people who can discern that beneath all of this functioning there is some kind of a bipolar dialectical process going on. There's mass and energy, there's light and dark, there's wet and dry. But what they do is they perceive the entire universe around them in dialectical terms. This is a classic function of the second chakra of their body, that is in their gonads, that basically perceive them as mates, as male and female. In that there's a fundamental dialectical perception system going on here. In the root chakra of the first paradigm is that there's an experience of ourself as a separate and individuated nodule of consciousness in the universe, and they experience themselves as separate and apart. This is the ontological experience of separate identity that is critical. And those who experience that in an intense way live in constant fear that their individuality is going to be extinguished through death, and that they live in fear of this. Okay, the second paradigm people are able to at least discern a basic underlying dialectical dynamic that's going on. But the lower manifestation of that worldview is confrontational dialectics. It's Hegelian dialectics. Its higher manifestation, of course, is Taoism, the yin and the yang, in a dance of integrated relationship to each other. That this whole set, this octave of human worldviews that we experience, if anybody thinks about it clearly enough, you can see that it tracks the chakras in the human body. I mean, you can see that happening in these energy centers in our human body. That individuals have one or another of these chakra centers comes to dominate the energy in their body, and it generates an energy field all around surrounding their body as part of their aura that actually functions as a filter. It functions as a prism that prisms reality coming into you through this energy field around your body, which conveys to you only information that confirms that particular chakra energy center.
Right.
This is something that's extraordinarily important for people to understand. And the Hindus understand this. They understand the chakra system. The Buddhists understand this. The problem is that the Catholic Christian Church in the 3rd century AD, at the Council of Nicaea, they not only condemned as heresy the belief in reincarnation, but they condemned any of this other stuff about bodily energies that were understood in the Eastern cultures, as being heretical, because they wanted to repose power in the institution of the Catholic Church to stand between the individual and the infinite and eternal, that they wanted to superimpose themselves. But the fact of the matter is 99.9% of the people at that time were completely illiterate. That they never experienced, they never moved farther than 25 miles away from the place at which they were born.
Right.
So the effort on the part of good faith people who have an experiential discernment of this more subtle realm of reality, they have to go through this process of trying to figure out how to bring this down, how to kind of lower the rheostat to get it down to the point where you can convey this to people who are completely illiterate. And what they did is they developed a whole set of mythologies and poetic images and fables and stuff to share with the people, to at least at the beginning, in good faith, to try to convey to them the substantive truth that these more subtle realms contain. But the problem is that as soon as Constantine, it was actually Constantinian, his nephew, in the third century A.D., when they decided that they were going to make make Catholicism the state religion of Rome, they dragged the institutions into becoming a co-partner with authoritarian royalist traditions. And that royalism infected the Catholic Church, and it caused the Roman Rite to make the mistake of putting a pope who was just one of the primates of the worldwide Christian Church at the time, into asserting papal infallibility and all those things. There's a whole series of mistakes that were made, but if you can look at those mistakes and rectify them, we can start to bring about greater unity among the people of faith in the world. And that's what Francis is doing. Francis is willing to acknowledge the mistakes that they've made, and he's in the process of acknowledging each one of them step by step here, and we're in the process right now of getting him to try to revoke the doctrine of discovery, that was issued in 1493 by Pope Alexander VI, where he declared that the Christian countries such as Spain and Portugal and others have the right to enslave the indigenous people of the world, to take custody of all of their territory and land, and they can do so with the sanction of the Catholic Church. That has to be revoked. That has to be consciously revoked. They've tried over different times. Well, we don't do that anymore. We've kind of apologized for that. They've got to revoke it. They've got to denounce it entirely and revoke it. And there are other things. They've got to denounce this doctrine of papal infallibility on the part of the pontiff in Rome. They've got to reestablish the egalitarianism among the primates of the different portions of the Christian Church. They have to start apologizing for mistakes that they made that generated various Protestant denominations, so that the people of faith around the particular prophet of Jesus of Nazareth have to be able to come together to understand and appreciate that he was a mutation, that he was in fact the good news. He was the good news of what our human family is going to be evolving eventually into being. And these charisms that he displayed, the ability to levitate, the ability to transmogrify, water into wine, the things that he could do, these are things that the prophets have done for thousands of years. These are things that the prophets and other major world traditions are able to do, because these are charisms of the more evolved human species. Okay? So these are things that we have to all come together to really come to grips with, make use of the education that we were able to snatch from the jaws of a public education system that was trying to, indoctrinate us to become cogs in the transnational corporate capitalist machine, and take advantage of our ability to think creatively and work together. That's what we do here at the Romero Institute. I mean, people can contact us here. We have the RomeroInstitute.org. Now with the new internet things that we have available, the radio shows like you have that go out over the internet like this. We have an opportunity to mobilize, but we have to become convinced that we can do this, that we can't be afraid of biting off pieces that are too big to chew, because if we don't bite off those big enough to choose, we're going to starve to death here, and worse yet, we're going to kill ourselves, and it's important for us to understand the we of all of this. It's not really us and them, the good guys and the bad guys.
Right.
Because that's just falling prey to the second paradigm dialectic.
It is.
And the bottom line is they've got more missiles, more weapons, more viciousness they can throw down on us than we can ever do to them in competition with them. What we have to do is to grow a new reality.
Let me ask you,
grow a new reality.
Let me ask you this, and also, Danny. Obviously, the show's going to end here in a few minutes. Not the show, your segment, But I can get, if you want to hang on for a little overtime because I've got a couple of other things I've got to hit you with. I knew you weren't. I knew you weren't going to say no. How could you? Is this? Do you? And this is a direct question that needs a direct answer.
Sure.
Here, Francis, he gets voted in, right? He's the new pope, right? And he goes to the Vatican, he gets his new suit. We've talked about that before, and he goes in and sits down. Is there a room, seriously, that he walks into? I mean, they say it exists and that this is real, but he walks in and he literally talks to God. Is that a reality, or is that something that has turned into myth and legend?
Yeah, no, that's just mythology. I mean, the reality is, in my opinion, that, as I pointed out before, that the physical cosmos that is made up of mass and energy, and that we know that mass can be transformed into energy, and energy can be transformed into mass, and that the relationship is just M equals MC squared. We know all of that,
right?
And what we don't realize is that if you start to break down every single atom in the universe of every single element in the periodic chart, is disintegrating at the rate that is equal to its rate of atomic breakdown. And they're all breaking down into the subcomponent elements that make up that other element. And that process of disintegration is going on at one and the same time that the entire universe is expanding out and away from the locus of the original Big Bang. We know all of that's happening. And there will come a point in time when every single ultimately irreducible integer of matter in the universe, which at the present time we believe to be an inchoate quantum field. It's not materially manifest. It's neither a wave of energy nor a particle of mass. It actually blinks out of material existence if you start to subdivide them long enough. In that you subdivide that final quark or meson or muon, and it disappears into an inchoate quantum field. But it flashes back into material manifestation, either as a wave of energy or a particle of mass, and then it blinks back out of material manifestation. And then it blinks back into material manifestation either as a particle of mass or a wave of energy. And it does so in a way that's completely unpredictable. That they've run out the algorithms under the 1,000th decimal point, and they can't compute any kind of pattern in which this is happening.
Right,
but what they do recognize is that if you can isolate an inchoate quantum field like that, that if human intention is directed to that inchoate quantum field, willing it to manifest as a particle of mass or as a wave of energy, it will do so.
It will respond.
It will respond to a statistically significant degree. Okay, now that's extraordinarily important because it's showing that if you get into quantum physics and you understand that every single quantum field is blinking on and off all the time, so that reality itself is disintegrating and reintegrating in every micromillisecond. Okay, but if you can direct your human intention to a particular manifestation of reality, you can have a statistically significant effect upon the next manifestation of reality itself.
No question.
Now,
no question.
This is something that has been known to the prophets forever. Okay. Now, what we have to do is we have to harness this type of intention and focus on a very specific future and a future reality that we want to bring into being, that we can bring this into being by our joint will. Now, I'm not talking about by just sitting around and praying together or even meditating all one time on the planet.
Right.
I'm talking about meditation in action. So that the 20 minutes in the morning of meditation and 20 minutes at night, and a proper diet and taking care of yourself and doing adequate exercise and staying healthy and young.
Can I do all of that? Can I do all of that and still drive a Ferrari?
Well, no. You can't. No, you don't get a Ferrari out of this. It's like one of my very, very dear friends who will remain nameless right now, who's very well known to everybody, that had never done LSD.
Right.
Still has not. And I said to him, gee, I mean, this is an extraordinary experience that you've probably heard a lot about. Why is it that you are avoiding doing this? And he said, I'm afraid that if I do LSD, it will interfere with my desires.
Oh, man. Okay. And he's right. And he's absolutely right.
And I said, you are absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Let's take a break right here.
And that's what meditation does. Same thing.
It's such an obvious statement, right? He just didn't want to give it up. That is hilarious. Our guest tonight, Danny Sheehan. Now, Danny, when we come back, actually, I want you to think about this. Were the Pentagon Papers the same as Edward Snowden's bombshell? Think about that. Don't answer me yet. Do it after the break. Okay. This is Fade to Black. Our guest tonight, Danny P. Sheehan. I'm Errol Jimmy Church. We'll be right back.
Here, and you are listening to my boy Jimmy Church on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Despite popular opinion, reading a book will not make you smarter,
but listening to Jimmy Church will.
Does your basement or crawl space have a damp, musty smell? Well, watch out. That's a sign of too much moisture and not enough ventilation. And that can mean increased mold growth and the buildup of harmful toxins and gases. Don't bother with a dehumidifier. It just circulates the same unhealthy air. Now there's a better way to remove these dangers and odors. It's with the computerized Wave Moisture Control Unit that reduces moisture and expels pollutants.
We replaced our old dehumidifier with the Wave unit, and in only 3 weeks, our basement is dry and the musty smell is gone.
Wave units require no maintenance, no buckets of water or filters, and costs only pennies a day to run. Breathe better, live healthier with an affordable, no-maintenance Wave unit. Call 888-618-WAVE, 888-618-WAVE, or visit mydryhome.com. mydryhome.com.
Ride the wave. Wave Home Solutions for a healthy, comfortable home.
Right before the break, I had mentioned the Pentagon Papers, and you're absolutely right. What happened, and most, we've got a generation gap here that may not remember the significance of that and what that did, not only to Washington, but to the public at the same time. Same thing went down. Well, no, that's my question to you. Do you think that the Snowden revelations were the same or had the same impact that the Pentagon Papers did?
Well, potentially even more than the Pentagon Papers. The Pentagon Papers, as you recall, that we came into possession of them at the New York Times at the point where the Vietnam War was the focal point of almost all of the organizing that was going on in the United States. There were a whole set of derivative insights that came from organizing against the Vietnam War. We began to realize that the United States was engaged in an aggressive war into Vietnam. We came to understand that, we could hear what the Vietnamese were saying, showing that it wasn't true, all the things the United States was saying. But the propaganda machine of the United States and the media and the military were drowning out any kind of alternative stories. And so that the people were rising up all around the country. It's hard for many people who weren't of age at that time to understand the degree of disruption that was being generated in the culture at that particular time.
Every city, every college campus.
Every campus, every city, everybody was up in arms, basically. And the fact is that it had actually come to the point where people were taking up arms against the United States government and their police and everything else. The Black Panthers, the Weather Underground, others, etc. And what happened is that at that point in time, the Pentagon Papers became available to us through Dan Ellsberg and Neil Sheehan, and the editors and publishers, Punch Sulzberger and Jim Goodell, who was chief counsel for the New York Times, brought the news to Lord Day and Lord, that was their law firm, telling them that they come into possession of these papers. And the law firm, Lord Day and Lord, told them that if they didn't turn the documents back over immediately, Lord Day and Lord was going to turn them in to the FBI.
Mm-hmm.
And so they called me. Jim Goodell called me at the Cahill Gordon firm where I was. And because I've been doing the briefs in the United States Supreme Court on the case that established the right of journalists to protect their confidential news sources. Cahill, Gordon, Sonnet, Reindel, and Ohl, our firm, were representing NBC News, and it was an NBC journalist that I represented originally at Harvard Law School that was the principal plaintiff in that case, the principal client. So that's how I ended up getting recruited to go to the Cahill firm that represented NBC. And I was writing not only the briefs for NBC, the primary briefs from the United States Supreme Court on the right of journalists to protect their confidential news sources for NBC, but I was also writing the amicus briefs for CBS and ABC, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. I was writing amicus briefs for all of them so that we could surround the justices and craft a majority decision that we were engaged in at the time. And because of that, I got to know Jim Goodell pretty well, who was the general counsel of the New York Times. So when Lord Day and Lord told them that they were going to turn them into the FBI, Punch Sulzberger and Neil Sheehan and everybody else, if they didn't turn the documents back over right away, Jim Goodell called me. And so I took the phone call. He came to the office, and I met with him and with Floyd Abrams and Gene Scheinman, my other partner at the law firm. And we made the decision in that meeting to print the Pentagon Papers. And when the Pentagon paper, Jim Goodell said to me, well, what do you think is going to happen if we start publishing these? I said, well, if we're lucky, old meathead Mitchell, John Mitchell, the Attorney General under Nixon, I said, if we're really lucky, he'll try to charge you guys with some kind of criminal offense. And he looked at me and he said, criminal offense? Like what kind of criminal offense? I said, well, if we're lucky, espionage.
Lucky, right.
He almost freaked out.
Right.
And then I explained to him there was a case called U.S. v. Gorin, which made it clear that if you're going to charge somebody with espionage, you have to prove particular intent and scienter, and we would walk all over them in the courtroom. And so anyway, so we finally persuaded them to publish these things. We started publishing them on June 13th of 1971 on the front page, and as I said to him, I said, the only decision you guys should be worrying about is what size font to use on the headline, I said, for this at the Times. And so we went ahead and started publishing them. And what it did is it basically pulled the underpinnings out from under the Nixon administration. And by proxy, the Lyndon Johnson administration as well, pulling the pins out from underneath them, because it showed in internal, top secret, classified documents showed that the administrations, one after another, were blatantly lying to the American people, that this was a well-planned, aggressive war to invade the peninsula, the Vietnam Peninsula, to try to establish a land base, a U.S. military land base in Southeast Asia for the projection of U.S. military power into there, and that they were taking over from the French that had come in 1889 and had seized Indochina and set up a colonial regime there that had been pushed out of there by Ho Chi Minh, and the U.S. was taking. And it showed all the details of what it is that was going on. But it was from such an authoritative source, the New York Times, that it was basically devastating to the administration. They could no longer maintain any type of legitimacy for the war. And so what it did is it knocked the struts right out from under the Nixon administration. And so he immediately transferred over into saying that he had a plan by means of which to bring the war to an end, and that he was campaigning we did this in June of 1971, and it was 13 days from the time that we started printing all the way through. We went through the litigation in the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York in front of Judge Murray Gerfine. They appealed. We won there, and they went up to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, and they got a temporary order telling us to stop publishing these until the Supreme Court could be convened. It was summertime at that point, from June 13th on, and the Supreme Court was out of session, and they had to send out the law clerks from the U.S. Supreme Court to get Justice Douglas off a mountain in Oregon that he was claiming. They had to regather all the justices, and I got to be there in the courtroom. We were arguing the case to the Supreme Court.
How old were you?
Pardon?
I know I give you a hard time about this, but how old were you? You were a kid.
Well, that was 1971. I was 25. I was 26.
That's insane. That is insane.
But I just happened to have a little bit clearer insight into why it was that it would be completely unconstitutional for them to try to stop the New York Times from publishing these papers, and I had kind of a little more pristine perspective on what the answer to the question was. So that was why I was writing the briefs and got to be there for the argument and everything else. But what happened is it completely withdrew the legitimacy from the Nixon administration's war in Southeast Asia. And what happened is in 1972, just the very next year, when the re-election campaign for Richard Nixon started, Richard Nixon was in a death spiral. His political legitimacy had completely collapsed, and he was desperate to try to stay in control. And that whole thing resulted in the wiretapping of the Democratic National Convention or national headquarters. I happened to be privileged also to do that litigation of representing James McCord when I was over at F. Lee Bailey's office as one of their three defense attorneys. And we ended up getting James McCord to blow the whistle on Richard Nixon on that one and his whole plumbers unit, which led to the articles of impeachment against Nixon and his resignation. But the Pentagon Papers were the beginning of the end for Richard Nixon. It was and what's happened with Snowden. Well, let's back up. The Pentagon Papers were directed specifically and narrowly to that all-important issue of the war in Vietnam,
right,
and the American military aggression and occupation.
That's right.
What Snowden has done, Snowden has revealed an entire panoply of documents. And while a lot of attention is focused upon the fact that they're talking about the illegal electronic surveillance system that has been imposed, by W. Bush and then was taken up by the Obama administration, and that they pulled the covers off that particular secret. The bottom line is that there were all kinds of cable traffic and stuff that's been going on, that's being revealed now, that shows the myriad areas in which the government institutions are lying, and that they're actually the handmaidens of the major corporations that are funding them, and that they're pursuing the economic interests of these major corporations in deploying our military forces in over 500 military bases around the world to project U.S. military power into every crevice of the planet so they can establish full spectrum dominance over the world for the benefit of the major corporations. On the theory that if the corporations are making lots and lots of money, they employ lots of people, it trickles down to others. It's the Donald Trump theory of economic development, and so that they were all wedded to that, and it's been made clear in the revelations that have been done by Snowden now, and WikiLeaks, of course. I mean, what's being exposed now is the dark underbelly of the national security state. And so this has the opportunity to have even more far-reaching consequences for undermining the blind allegiance that people give to the leaders of the Republican and Democratic Party. What we have to do is we have to mobilize and organize a genuinely viable, alternative, progressive political party in the United States, where we can all come together and formulate completely comprehensive alternative policies and plans and educate the American people over the top of the major corporate-owned media. You know, we've got to conscientize our people into supporting an alternative economic system, an alternative system of protecting constitutional liberties, an alternative system of funding schools, an alternative system of training police to conduct themselves in a constitutional manner. You know, the idea of the American undertaking is such a fantastically great idea if we can get it to comport with the promises that it's made. And the same thing is true, actually, of Russia and the ideals of that revolution back in 1917, if they can be adhered to, if they can be adequately implemented, you know, with the amendment that they have to now resuscitate the Orthodox Church in Russia and all the Jewish community, all of the different religions in Russia need to be allowed to flourish. And very surprisingly, that's exactly what Putin is doing. You know, Putin is being accused of embezzling billions of dollars of money, which he's doing. But the fact is he's directing a lot of that money to rebuilding the Orthodox churches all throughout Russia. And, in fact, repurchasing the Orthodox church properties all through Europe. And I've been there, and I've gotten to meet with the Metropolitan and the other people in the Orthodox Church, and so that there's a huge potential resuscitation of the people of spirit and people of faith around the world. I think that if we can salvage a genuine spirituality from the grips of institutional churches, and rekindle the commitment of some of these institutional churches to the original vision that they were founded for, then this provides the vehicle by means of which we can raise the consciousness of our human family to be able to radically amend these institutions, to bring them back into focus, to pursue the original ideals of those institutions, both in Western culture and in the Eastern culture. I'm convinced that that's true.
I don't know. Before I let you go and we wrap the show, I want to read this to you. This happened today, and I want your reaction to it as brief as we can do this. But yeah. Iraq's transport minister, his name is Kazim Finjan, was at a press conference today, and he was speaking. Rita, run the links to this on Twitter so everybody can actually see the video. He was speaking at a press conference for the opening of a new airport, international airport in southern Iraq, right? So he gets up at the press conference, and he says that, and I'm not making this up, you can watch the video, that ancient aliens built the Earth's first airport 7,000 years ago in the Middle East and used it for interplanetary missions. And I'm not joking, right? So he gets up there, and I'm quoting directly from him. This is what he said today. I peeled this off of the video. He says, quote, "The first airport that was established on planet Earth was in this place. It was constructed 5,000 years before Christ. It remains the safest for landing and takeoff of aircraft due to favorable weather conditions. When the Sumerians settled on this land, they were aware of this and have chosen specifically for their flights to other planets." End quote. What do you make of that? As much as I love Sitchin and the Anunnaki story and Sumerian tablets and all of that, and I love it, but he got up in front of the press and said this publicly. What do you make of a statement like that?
It's pretty extraordinary. That's for sure. It's going to be very interesting to see if any play is given to it here in the United States. You can be sure that the major corporate-owned media are going to lock down and not do anything. If anything, just ridicule it. But it's extraordinary, actually. You know, it's extraordinary. I've got to get a look at this and find out what, if anything else, he has said what type of authorization he might have had for saying something like this from the regime in Iraq. It's going to be very, very interesting. It's so kind of startling that it's difficult to kind of gauge what the impact of this may be. It certainly is going to be something dramatically more muted than one would think it should be if you have a government official like that standing up in front of the world media and announcing that.
Yeah, he said a couple of other things, too, that I didn't put in this. And he went on and on and on, Danny.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that he said, he goes, this is a perfect place meteorologically, those are his words, where the atmosphere here doesn't interfere with aircraft coming in, coming out, they can land safely. And the Sumerians knew this, and they were able to bring their spacecraft in and land 7,000 years ago, and they were able to take off without any interference from, and he goes on, the sun, the clouds, the wind, and storms, it's a perfect place, and we've known this forever. I was, wow. It was
that's a wow.
Yeah, there was
sure.
there was like 7 or 8 guys standing behind him. I mean, it was a huge press conference, huge. I mean, the 50 microphones and all of that, and you could hear a pin drop when he's saying this, and the guys behind him with their arms folded, and they're just standing there. Nodding their heads. Nobody pulled him off the stage. Nobody did anything, but he is their transport minister. It's,
that's definitely intriguing.
How much?
Not that a lot of things that we've been talking about tonight are not.
Right. No, I know.
That's a real potential blockbuster.
Yes, absolutely.
But I'm sure it won't be treated as such by the American media.
Yeah, we'll see what happens tomorrow. Right now, it's probably on the front page of RT, right? But
try to get John Podesta to go interview him.
Yeah, let's see. Thank you so much, Danny, and I can't wait to see you again. And we'll go out and break bread, of course. Are you speaking anywhere? Anything you want to announce, really quick?
Let me see. What have I got coming up here? I'm going to be speaking at the Conscious Life Expo.
Oh, I'll see you there.
I'm going to be talking at the New Paradigm gathering, Jordy Pieces thing in March 25th, I think. I've got to go over to Rome sometime between November 6th and November 22nd to see Cardinal Turkson again and have these conversations. My staff organizes all of these trips that I have to do, but I'm doing one right here in the middle of. Oh, I know. The first is that I'm going to be doing Sean Stone's show on Gaia Television over in Boulder, Colorado.
Right.
On the 17th of October here. Sean has just moved from radio to television. He's Oliver Stone's son.
Yes. Good friend.
Who's just written a very interesting book about tracking the history of Professor Elliott at Harvard University, how he was using his position as the master of Elliott House at Harvard to recruit CIA people. The same thing that we discovered at Master Smithies at Kirkland House, immediately next door to Elliott House at Harvard.
Right.
Recruiting kids to the CIA.
Yeah, I heard it's an amazing read, and Sean is really cool, and
Sean is cool.
The apple doesn't fall too far from the tree in that Stone family. Let me tell you.
But he's trying to establish his own new growth for us around himself. He's striking out on his own. He's doing a good job, and that book I think helps get him situated. I've had him send a copy of it to me so I can read it before we do the show here on the 17th.
Well, I'll see you in February down here in Los Angeles for the Conscious Life Expo, and I'll introduce you. How's that?
Fantastic.
I'll talk to you.
On.
Thank you so much, Danny. Behave.
Okay, Jimmy.
You got it.
Goodbye, everybody. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Daniel Sheehan. We've got all of his links up for his websites, Romero Institute, DanielPSheehan.com, or over at JimmyChurchRadio.com. Go and check it out. And if I invite everybody to the Conscious Life Expo, which will be in February. We're hosting a bunch of events there, too, as well, and I can't wait to hang out with Danny. He is just the best. But we'll be there. We'll be broadcasting live on Friday night, and, of course, we'll have Daniel on with us Friday night. And then Saturday, I'm hosting the Ancient Aliens panel, and then I think I might be doing some other stuff that Saturday afternoon. They've got the whole schedule laid out. But Conscious Life Expo in February. Come down and hang out with Daniel, Sheehan, and all of us here at Fade to Black. Yeah, it was a crazy statement today by the transport minister in Iraq. We've got the videos up over on Twitter. You can go and check it out. It actually really happened. But there's something else. I meant to ask Daniel about this. This phenomenon that's going on right now with these creepy clowns. And now it was announced today that this craziness is now entered into the United Kingdom. British school children right now are being terrorized by pranksters dressed as creepy clowns, leaping out from behind bushes and chasing people down the street. And they're thinking now that all of this is being inspired what is going on here in the United States. Newcastle police are trying to identify those responsible for the stunts, saying that they've arrested one teenage creepy clown allegedly carrying a bladed article in connection with one of the incidents. It was a little over a week ago when I first reported about the children at the Fleetwood Manor apartment complex in Greenville, South Carolina, who started to say that they saw someone dressed as a clown with a white painted face that was hanging out behind the basketball courts there and trying to lure some of them into the woods. But that was a week ago. Within days, it spread to other eastern states, and then yesterday were reports coming out of the western United States, and today it's in the UK and going global. Total 100% insanity, kind of like the election right now. Now, check this out. I got to get these last two things in before I let you go. Citizens in Iraq's city of Mosul have been issued a fatwa banning them from keeping felines, that's right, cats, at home, claiming the new law supports jihadist vision of ideology and beliefs. Keeping cats at home is no longer allowed for Mosul residents. The terrorist group IDS, or the Islamic Doofus State, formerly ISIS, that's right, I've renamed them. Go ahead, tell on me. I'm not scared. They said in the new decree, the Islamic State's Central Fatwa Committee has issued a fatwa against cats inside houses in Mosul. In other crazy-ass fatwa news, I'm going to give you this gem. Senior clerics fighting for the Islamic Doofus State, the IDS, have issued a fatwa banning pigeon breeding, claiming that, and I'm quoting here, the sight of the bird's genitals as they fly overhead is offensive to Islam, end quote. The IDS, or the Islamic Doofus State, formerly ISIS, operating in the Euphrates province that stretches from Anbar in Iraq up to Deir ez-Zor in Syria, told pigeon breeders that they had 1 week to stop the practice or they will face prison, a fine, and or public flogging. That's right, the IDS. The Islamic Doofus State, formerly ISIS. I've renamed them. From here on out, on Fade to Black, it's the IDS, the Doofus State. Fade to Black is produced by executive producer Rita Kamarian. Show is produced by Hilton J. Paul, Mark D. Kovar, LJ3, Renee, Mark Dunbar, Jonas. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Bob. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vitoa, Mark D. Kovar, Faded by Dale. Webmaster is Drew, the Geek. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. Music by Doug Aldrich. Intros, Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Syndication is KGRA, The Planet. Thank you, Daniel P. Sheehan. Sorry I didn't take any calls. I saw them all coming in, but that's the way it goes. I am the boss. Tomorrow night, John Rappaport, Open Lines, Fader Night. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2016 by Faded Black and the Game Changer Network. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Faded Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Follow me right now on Twitter at JChurchRadio. I'm out of here. Sausage, gravy, and biscuits. Go Beckley Teppy.